Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. On the last episode, we were pressing against the Lustiani forces. Eusebius moved his army to besiege the city of Impera, choosing to siege them out and force them to sally against him later on. Meanwhile, Cretheus crossed over to Mauritania to engage a Lustiani army coming out of Tingis there. He was able to defeat them with relative ease, despite some weirdness from their reinforcement directions making things complicated, and after the battle he was able to capture the city as a result of the enemy's garrison being heavily depleted, so we've taken new territory in Mauritania. But that wasn't enough for Cretheus. He was immediately going to press eastwards towards the Lustiani's stronger positions out there. Back in Impera, Eusebius was attacked by the Lustiani defenders, but they were very predictable and played right to his strength, so were completely defeated. Cretheus reached Eol and Homer backed him up to begin a siege of that settlement. They only had one turn of supplies, so I chose to siege them out. It was a similar deal when Eusebius moved on to attack the Lustiani's home province. The enemy's army wasn't all that powerful, but I felt I had the patience to just siege them out and make sure things went our way. Now let's continue. With the Timucoi dismissing peace, the Lustiani were about to face a series of decisive battles that were for them a matter of survival. Their primary opponent would be Cretheus and his ambitious expeditionary forces, pressing hard against their recent gains in Mauritania with relentless speed. His haste was also his weakness though. With no consolidated domain or clear supply line behind him, Cretheus was one defeat away from losing all that he had gained over the last year, and if he survived, suffering a humiliation in the political sphere. But those great risks made the potential for glory even greater. We've just started the siege of Eol, and the Carthaginians moved 2 fleets to support my sieging position. This means that the balance of power in this battle is now going to be very far in our favour, and because the city only had 1 turn of supplies, immediately they attempt to sally out, because that's their only chance of surviving this really. But as you can see, the balance bar is so far in our favour that actually they probably had a better chance just begging us to spare them and surrendering. The Carthaginians have brought 2 very powerful armies that are going to provide a great deal of support in this attack. It's so far in our favour that I'm going to auto-resolve it. We can get some decent results on the auto-resolve percentages. The enemy are wiped out immediately, and let's have a look at the results. Curiously, Cretheus' force manages to be relatively unscathed, which is very important. Homer's doesn't take any casualties at all, and the Carthaginians take serious damage, so it seems Cretheus managed to convince the Carthaginians to do the majority of the work in that battle. This is ideal because it means Cretheus is strong enough to immediately press against the Lustiani even further. We get an offer of a defensive alliance from some random nomadic tribe over in the east. This happens now and again. We get random factions making strange demands like defensive alliances and, as you can see here, demanding money for the privilege. Usually I turn them down. So because Cretheus is in good shape and has all of his movement points at the start of this new turn, I can move south to attack the final powerful Lustiani position. That's the last of their forces there in the town. They do have a tiny army far to the west that I'm not too worried about. But as I advance, you can see this one's pretty powerful. The balance bar is very far in their favour when combined with the garrison. But again, they only have 1 turn of supplies, so I can siege them out and turn it into a field battle where Cretheus' phalanx should have a nice advantage on an open plain in the deserts. Eusebius is going to continue his siege of the Lustiani's home province there, so soon we should see the Lustiani really crumble before us. They only have 1 more chance to defeat us. The Carthaginians very kindly moved their forces to defend Eol and to go and support Eusebius during the end turn sequence. They're being very good allies indeed at the moment. The Lustiani, as expected, do sally out to attack Cretheus. The balance bar has slightly improved from last time now that it's a field battle, but it's still going to be a dangerous one. The enemy has a big numerical advantage, and they're also bringing some of their elite troops, guys who can easily best us man-to-man in melee. So we're going to have to be careful, and we're going to have to make sure that our pike phalanx holds its solidity against the enemy's superior numbers and fighting skill, because a breakdown in the phalanx will mean my men will be slaughtered by the enemy's heavy infantry. The battle begins, and you can see I've set up in a pretty standard formation for this sort of engagement. The pike phalanx in a long line, currently with skirmishers in front who will move back later on, and with heavy javelin throwers behind the line so that when the enemy are locked in place fighting with my pike phalanx, I can kill a number of them with javelins who will then draw their swords to take part in the battles on the flanks or break through the centre if possible. The enemy's army is slowly advancing towards us. We can see they've got some nice looking heavy infantry, heavy spears and swords leading the way. Guys will easily defeat my pike phalanx if they can break it up. Plenty more of them at the back as well. They also have some lighter units like these African units and plenty of skirmish units as well. Of particular importance to this battle is this unit of very heavy shocked cav being led by their general, the most powerful single unit we've seen in this series so far, a unit that could easily best any of my ground or cavalry units with its extreme charge. So now later on the enemy are closer to our line and begin to attacking in a strange formation actually, forming a big column almost, their reinforcements being left behind and running to catch up whilst their heavier infantry form up right in front of us, ready to advance. The enemy's heavy shot cav were moving towards my left flank, so I was tucking my cavalry back, not wanting my cavalry to get engaged with those heavy shot cav because they'll be wiped out. Their medium cav are making a very obvious attack on my right flank, so I'm preparing to defend against that with my own cavalry, who should be able to hold them off. Now the enemy's infantry are starting their attack, first moving up skirmish forces, who skirmish very well with my bowmen. Those javelins are going to do a lot of damage, but at least they're killing my lighter units rather than my heavier ones, which they would be better used on. The enemy's medium cavalry attack is defeated quite quickly. I take a lot of losses in the process among my own medium cavalry as well, but at least we've gotten rid of them. So now the enemy are committing more units against my pike phalanx, the first melee units coming into the fight. The pike phalanx should be able to hold them off as long as they don't take too much damage and lose their integrity. So for now, at the start of the battle, things are going to be quite safe in that regard. On the left flank, the enemy attack with more medium cavalry, slamming into my cavalry without me noticing and unfortunately getting the charge bonus on me, but my guys should be able to hold them off. I have experienced cav and shock cavalry nearby who'll come in to help. The enemy shock cavalry make their first attack. It looked really good for me because they charged right against the pike phalanx. A couple of them actually fall, but the vast majority of the enemy stop before hitting the pike phalanx and survive. Even those who actually did hit the pike phalanx weren't guaranteed to be cut down because it's such a heavy unit. And they're going to be cycle charging throughout the whole battle, so they're unfortunately not going to kill themselves against my pikes over time. My cavalry did actually rout on the right flank due to enemy missile fire, but came back from routing. I'm preparing my dogs on the right as well, ready to try and drive off those missile troops. In the meantime, my cavalry are going to attempt that as well. They have to be really careful because the enemy's reinforcements coming in have plenty of spears who could catch them. So I'm going to have to play cat and mouse and micromanage these cavalry to avoid any disappointing engagements for them, but try and keep my phalanx alive against their missiles. Advance? No. The enemy intend to simply attack the open gaps in our line. The flanks are safe. See how readily they move forwards, how they look upon our static line with relief. From their point of view, it is easy to believe that we do not move because we are exhausted, sick from a march through a barren desert, easily pushed over if only they tried. The finer details of supply trains are not something these tricksters usually deal with. And so, let us simply let them commit everything to an attack, then watch them despair as it slowly fails and our men creep around them. I have faith that my brave warriors can defeat even the best of these upstart tribes. Right on the left flank, the enemy are pressing heavily against some hoplites who are taking losses rapidly, here fighting with the enemy's shock cav, but also just fighting with enemy infantry, who are beginning to overwhelm them. The enemy's infantry are very light though, so I'm not expecting them to be completely defeated, but if they take any more shock charges, things could get dangerous there on the left. The enemy's medium cavalry in the area have also been defeated, so that's good news. Back on the right, my dogs have been released. Now, because the dogs have a mind of their own, they don't exactly do what I wanted them to. About half of them actually went to attack the enemy's heavy infantry rather than their light infantry. I thought that would be disastrous, but they actually held out really well and provided a good distraction against these enemy heavy troops, so very good for them. The rest of them did what I intended, chasing off the enemy's javelin troops and locking them into melee. The dogs should win in melee as well, so we should be able to destroy them like this. Further back, my cavalry are basically rounding up yet more enemy missile troops, pushing them around the map, stopping them from firing at me. Here on the left, after the defeat of the enemy's medium cav, I just formed up again, not wanting to move these cavalry out because I was paranoid about the enemy's heavy shock cav who have just come and sat, not even facing the battle, right off here on the edge. They could make a charge against either of my two cavalry positions now and easily destroy them, so it was very tense, just basically spending the whole battle staring at that unit waiting for it to make its move whilst the main fight went on in the centre without me. I eventually tried to use my cav to break up this main fight because it was getting a little bit bloody and our phalanx was starting to lose men rapidly. So I decided to do a shock charge against the back of the enemy's garrison forces, the lower morale guys, and we do start to see some routing occurring, slowly thinning out the ranks of this huge blob pressing against the phalanx. The phalanx itself is still doing okay. It hasn't lost integrity enough to not have multiple pikes facing forward, so it's still keeping the enemy at bay, which means our losses will only be coming quite slowly. You can see these two slinger units are now so close to the enemy's shock cav that I was too scared to actually go and attack them with my cav, so I'm going to leave them alone, which of course means they're going to bombard my phalanx, very annoying. Elsewhere, my cavalry are just going to focus on killing enemy routing units to make sure they shatter and don't come back. The main fight itself is getting pretty bloody on the right as well. You can see I've lost half of my hoplites fighting with the enemy's heavy infantry. The enemy have taken substantial losses as well, not quite as bad as me, but and they also have the numerical advantage of course, so over time that situation is going to get worse and worse. I needed to relieve those hoplites. Luckily, enemy breakages in the centre meant I could free up this pike phalanx to start pressing against the flank of the enemy's large formations there, and also go and help the hoplites on the left flank with another phalanx. The phalanx, you can see, is just standing next to the enemy because they're very slow to attack once you give them the order. They have to form up lots of times as they go in. Anyway, you can see I'm now moving my cavalry dangerously close to the enemy's shock cav, trying to drive off those missile units because I really needed to get rid of them and kill these routing units. I decided if I put all of my cavalry into this effort, then if the enemy shock cav attacked, at least I'd have a numeric advantage. And it turned out I did need that because the enemy shock cavalry decided to wake up, turned round and attack. Of course, they're fresh and all of my horsemen have been running around for the whole battle, giving the enemy an even bigger advantage on top of what they usually have. The only thing helping me is that they seem indecisive about which one to attack, so they don't really get a proper charge off on our units, and I'm able to totally surround with my cav and attack them from all sides. That's not enough of an advantage though. My men will still be wiped out in hand-to-hand combat because the enemy's stats are vastly superior to mine. So I realised I had to just quit the engagement, otherwise I would just lose all my men and the enemy probably wouldn't really lose any. So I used one unit to just distract the enemy whilst the rest escape, and then that distraction attempts to get away once my men have quit that engagement. I'm going to try and draw them back into the centre where I'll have more units to support and try and surround those shock cav even further. In the centre, you can see I have successfully surrounded the enemy's infantry with my own infantry, but the slow work of killing them is still going on because all of my guys don't really have very high attack values. Neither the phalanx nor hoplites are specialist attack units, so it's really just a slow grind. Cretheus rejoins the cavalry to smash against the enemy's shock cavalry in a counter charge, which does a lot of damage to both sides. Cretheus's men are somewhat able to compete with the enemy's heavy cavalry, but are still significantly worse. The enemy have only lost 20 of their cavalry so far. They've killed just that many of Cretheus's men, plus tons of the rest of my cavalry regiments, so I really need to hit them with some spears. I was moving up those pike phalanxes there just for that job, but they're getting bombarded by the slingers that of course I couldn't attack earlier because of the very heavy shock cav. So I'm taking losses, but it's worth it. I'm still going to push those pikes forward to try and catch those enemy shock cavalry into melee and then get the rest of my cav out of there while they still can. Back in the main fight, some of my units starting to rout. The casualties have just been too heavy. This unit of phalanx has almost been defeated, but they're still fighting on. I'm going to pull them out of the engagement because I didn't want them to lose any more men and rout from the field. Routing units could cause morale issues against the other units, which are also starting to waver against the enemy's sustained assault. The enemy are taking a punishment as well, of course, so it's not going to be good for them. It's going to be a fight to the end, really, here, where I think we have the slight advantage. Cretheus escapes the engagement with the enemy's cavalry. I didn't want to risk his life fighting against the enemy's general because it's very important he survives. The lesser cavalry will continue locking the enemy down whilst the pike phalanx attempts to get in there and kill some of them. It's now also time for my pelters to join the engagement, drawing their sword and moving out to attack the enemy's lighter troops. They're not particularly good in melee, so they're only really helpful for attacking light troops. Now you can see I did successfully get the enemy's cav to focus on my phalanx, and once they were focused, I smashed them from behind with a charge from Cretheus. That bold move caused the enemy's general to rout after he'd taken many casualties against the pike phalanx as well. This was the decisive moment in the battle. The rout of the general heavily impacted the morale of all the troops remaining fighting against my infantry line. You can see routs are starting to begin now. My infantry line took a real pounding fighting them, but now that they're going, especially all of these swordsmen, we're going to have a much easier time fighting with the limited number of men who will stay behind to see this fight to the end, like these heavy infantry. Both sides heavily depleted, just tiny units still fighting on either side. The dogs still in there, still going. Very good performance from the dogs in this battle. But a few minutes later, we managed to grind the enemy down even more to a close victory. This result means we'll almost definitely be able to take the settlement, but at what cost? Cretheus has lost a lot of men. The good news is that that was the last of the Lustiani's substantial forces in the area, so now they should have a period of peace. What am I supposed to do? This is the 5th letter from the council begging me to put a stop to Cretheus' conquest. Like he'll let me. They're virtually asking to start a civil war over this. I bet they'd like that. Me and Eusebius against the Republic, fighting for the cause of getting one bunch of old men back into power to replace the newer bunch. If the gods really are up there, they must be testing me with such responsibilities. Alright, let's forget about this until tomorrow. Time for another venture ashore, I think. Still plenty of ways to keep one entertained in Eol. Must be at least 1,000 girls we haven't seen yet in those places. So the Lustiani defenders are crushed by Cretheus in a close victory. Our loss is quite substantial, many of our units down into red, but all of the units not disbanding, so we'll be able to replenish them at the cost of experience later on. Especially doable because the Lustiani don't have any more forces to challenge us, so these men should be safe to hang around. After the end of the end turn sequence, the enemy surrender, the survivors surrendered that is, so Dumidi is now ours. This has really expanded our territory here in Mauritania. It was a giant region, and I'm going to get to work converting the buildings over to the ones I need. I need to start converting the whole region to Hellenistic culture at some point as well. So the Hands of the Timucoi have started their regeneration, their units getting more powerful, but it's going to be a while before they're back to their maximum fighting strength. The plan eventually will be to move them against the surviving Lustiani forces, but of course that can't happen right now. Back in the Lustiani's home territory, Eusebius initiates another battle because I thought the Carthaginian army behind me there was close enough to come in as a reinforcement army, but turns out it's not quite close enough. Looks like it's coming our way though, so it's possible next turn they'll get into range and we'll be able to team up with them to attack the Lustiani. So the Lustiani's other stronghold is Migdol, down here in southwestern Mauritania. They have no forces there and the garrison doesn't look particularly good. So overall, there's not much threat remaining from the Lustiani. It's just up to the Hands of the Timucoi to eventually go over there and defeat them, and I'm going to take my time so that I can regenerate troops on the way. Now I made an important trade deal with the Sakarauka. I thought that because they are a seemingly powerful Eastern Empire, I want to try and get some good relations with them to protect my central territories back up in Europe. But actually, according to the balance of power, they're not all that powerful anymore. And it turns out that they must have taken some losses during the recent turns while I wasn't paying too much attention, because if we go over and actually take a look at their territory, which has now become slightly visible because of the trade route, we can see they have this little nomadic town here, their capital, which is being attacked by a Getae army, which is taking damage as well. So I suspect they are at war with their neighbours, to which they've lost most of their home province already by the looks of things, and actually may be on the verge of defeat because all their armies are stuck off fighting the Boii in Eastern Europe. So that big potential threat may not be so much of a threat after all. Now we get some very inconvenient news. The Celtiberian Confederation has declared war on the Carthaginians. I have defensive alliances with both of them, but here it's testing my defensive alliance with Carthage. I can either join them in the war against the Celtiberian Confederation, or I can break my alliance with them. Now, I do value the alliance with Carthage, but unfortunately, being at war with the Celtiberian Confederation with our current setup of forces would be really inconvenient. You can see they already have forces in my home territory just standing around. So, avoiding war with them is important. Hopefully, I can try and get back in with the Carthaginians, because I don't want to war with them either. The Lustiani make a very cheeky deal. They actually want me to pay in exchange for peace, which just seems a little bit ludicrous considering they are definitely the underdog in this war, so I dismiss them. The council try again to get Cretheus back over to their side, and this time the cost of stopping them is massive. Luckily I happen to have accrued a fair bit of wealth because I'm not up to much at the moment, so I actually can stop them, but that was a little bit of a close call. If I'd been building some buildings, then I would have not been able to afford that. So that Carthaginian army that I was hoping would back Eusebius up actually does. So even though we're not allied to them anymore, they are also at war with the Lusitani, so they're willing to join this fight and help Eusebius capture the territory. The balance of power was so far in our favour now that I felt safe doing an auto-resolve, so Eusebius just knocks out the defenders and captures the settlement, with the losses spread pretty evenly between the two armies. So it looks like we teamed up in a quite honest sense to defeat the Lusitani here, but of course I'll be taking all the spoils because the region goes to me. So that's Lusitania unified, another whole province taken, and I'll start getting to work, converting it over to work for me. So good work Eusebius there. So all that really remains in the war with the Lusitani is for Cretheus to go over and defeat their final province and their final forces in Migdol. He is going to take his time so he can regenerate forces on the way, but I'm also not going to wait around too much because I don't want the enemy to build up a new army. We'll see how quickly I can take them down and what happens after the war next time.
The Carthaginians did not react as the Timucoi had expected to the breakdown of the alliance. It was clear that if Massalia was to enter the war, they would likely begin a land grab similar to the one they had performed against the Lusitani. For Carthage, being the only belligerent in the war, in which they already had a clear advantage, allowed them a chance to take lands in key strategic locations should a conflict with Massalia ever arise. Seeing this too late, the Massalians were obliged to let their friends do this without complaint. The only thing they could do in return was to make their new lands in Mauritania a staging post of their own.